So with that, I'm going to kick us off for part 3, Design for Change, in our 4-part school design webinar series. As I mentioned before, I am Brittany Griffin, your host for today's webinar, and I am joined by two incredible panelists that I will have introduce themselves in just a moment. But for now, let me introduce you to Carmen Sanders from Alexandria City Public Schools, a real rock star on the East Coast, and Wendy Farron from Chico Country Day School over on the West Coast. I cannot wait to highlight these leaders and let them share their incredible school design stories with you. It's powerful stuff on today's webinar. You're really in for a treat. So with that, I'm just going to do some quick anchoring before I turn it over to our panelists to tell us more about their school design. As Devin always kicks us off, I think it's important to anchor in the why we're here. This webinar series is part of our broader vision to build education ecosystems where all learners know who they are, thrive in community, and actively engage in the world as their best selves. And we know school design is a big part of making that vision come to life. As you all know, we're in a 4-part webinar series, and today is day 3, Design for Change. So by the end of today, hopefully you're starting to think about what your design for change could look like. And we'll hopefully after this webinar, go get some feedback from stakeholders in your community to come back in session 4 next Monday to really refine and plan for impact. So what edits do we want to make to that plan to make sure you are ready to go to take your next steps in school design? And as always, we just want to acknowledge that school design, we believe, is part of a much bigger learner-centered ecosystem. So don't forget about things like whole learner outcomes or enabling conditions, such as time and structure and schedules and culture, and all of those things that will either enable or block your work to transform your schools. As we've talked about many times on this webinar series, we are really anchoring on these 6 elements, these school design structures, to intentionally support learner-centered practices. And each of our panelist stories, we've tried to align to these 6 structures. Later on in the breakouts, we'll invite you to think about which of these structures feel like the right levers to tinker with in your context. And as I mentioned before, start to build out a plan for how you want to implement those changes. To double click on each of those 6, we've introduced the concept of big moves, right? What are the changes that are popular and powerful within the realm of each of these 6 different structures? We'll come back to those again today. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list by any means. There's lots of different ways to approach this work, but we've got links and resources that are in your session design workbook or your school design workbook that we'll look at a little bit later today. Just want to recap very quickly that we've heard from 3 different schools so far. We heard from Eric and Vita, which is in California, talking about identity, that design thinking school, real world learning, project-based, and distributed leadership. We heard from Hidden Valley Middle School in Escondido, also in California, that was very much in the design process right now. They've got year 0 under their belt where they're redefining school design through a micro school model, really emphasizing small learning communities, teacher collaboration, and distributed leadership. And then we also heard from Katina and Benji from Vista Academy, at VAPA, and they talked about all 6 design structures over an 8-year period, so a much longer timeline. So today's panelists are, as I mentioned, Wendy and Carmen, and they'll share their own stories of school design. By the end of this 4-part series, you know this, we've talked through this each time, but you'll have a documented vision for where you want to go, an understanding of the strengths in your system, and some identified next steps. And those last 2 are really what we're going to focus on drafting today. And also, we want you to feel very included, part of a community, and like your questions and ideas are valued. And so throughout this webinar series, we're trying to pause, take time for questions, promote dialogue, not only with panelists, but amongst the participants as well. And as always, our flow today is just like before. We'll do a little connection, we'll do some panelist interviews, hop back into breakout rooms, and reflect and close. Speaking of panelist interviews, let's dive right in. We're going to start with Carmen. Carmen, do you want to tell us a little bit about Alexandria City Public Schools and your school redesign experience?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. And I'm very excited to be here with you all. As Brittany stated, my name is Carmen Sanders. I'm the Executive Director of Instructional Support in Alexandria City Public Schools. So, all general education, content areas, as well as programs fall under my purview. And so, what Brittany referenced was what we coined the high school project. In Alexandria City Public Schools, we have one high school, Alexandria City High, and it has four campuses. It has the King Street campus, the Minnie Howard campus, the satellite campus, as well as the Transfer Change campus. And so, in this redesign, our goal was to really reimagine what school could be for our secondary students. And so, just to give you some logistics, we are right outside of Washington, D.C., and right next door to Arlington, specifically Arlington Public Schools. We have approximately 4,500 students at Alexandria City High School, and I think that that's significant when we think about the redesign and the implications as we think about operations of the redesign. And then when we thought about the constraints, we tried to reframe it in the fact that this was an opportunity for us to take this large population and really help to re-engage students in real world learning and project based learning so that they can draw connections to the content that they were teaching, that they were learning. And so we have a very, very strong emphasis on equity in Alexandria City Public Schools, and that's meeting our students where they are and giving them what they need. And as well as equity, we talk about access and opportunity. So, how do we get these students who may come from underrepresented populations the opportunity to learn and grow in our spaces? And so here on this slide, you'll see the framework for the future was work that we started to do with Learner Centered Collaborative as a part of the high school project. So before we got to the academies of Alexandria City, the high school project started back in 2017. And it's originally started just to think about the capacity of the high school and what experiences we wanted our students to engage in. And it grew from there as we thought about the structure of the high school, the redesign of our mini Howard campus that was previously an only ninth grade campus, to it transitioning into a grades 9 through 12 campus. And so, working with the Learner Center Collaborative, we started with doing learning visits. And the learning visits were incredibly eye opening for us. We engaged with multiple stakeholder groups to include our most important stakeholder, our students, our families, our staff. We had school leadership as well as division leadership that were a part of these visits. And there were multiple questions that were asked around what we wanted to see as it related to learning experiences for students. And the larger themes that came from that specifically were that our students wanted real world experiences, they wanted more field trips, they wanted trust, which lends itself to the idea of creating smaller learning communities in this very huge high school where students could possibly feel lost. And so we put all of those things together and began to build a plan that would help us to envision what we wanted our students to be able to do and be when they left high school. And so we came up with the profile of a learner. And these attributes are not only tied specifically to our students, but we hope that all learners within Alexandria City Public Schools would exemplify these attributes. And so we have our critical thinker, our collaborator, change maker, innovative, innovator, communicator, and advocate. And those are the attributes that we have settled on. And so, as we think about all of the different attributes, we know that it is tied to social and emotional learning, much of which we know helps our students to prepare themselves for learning experiences when they get into the classroom. And so, we are connecting the social and emotional learning components with the outcomes, the learning outcomes in the classroom. And that is what has led us to our deeper learning framework. And as you can see here in the center is our profile of a learner. And then in the circle, we see that we are focusing in on the inquiry based learning. So we question, we investigate, we create, we reflect. And when we talk about creation, we're not just talking about creating as it relates to a product, but you are also forming opinions, perspectives. And so on the outside, we see that those are things that we want our educators to begin to think about. And specifically, we want our students to feel as they're in the classroom. We want students to feel that the learning is responsive to their needs, to their cultures, to their linguistic diversity, relevant, accessible, and intentional. So when students come into classrooms, they know exactly what they are to learn, and they are excited about the process of learning, not just about the test that comes after that. It's the process of learning. And so here in the academies at Alexandria City, what we have used to help push post-secondary planning, and this is really supported by the Virginia Department of Education as we think about the career connections journey. We know that in grades K through 5, students are to produce an academic and career portfolio as they leave the 5th grade. When students leave the 8th grade, they should have an academic and career plan. And then when they leave high school, of course, we want all of our students to have a post secondary plan. And so the way that we do that is that we engage students in their passions and interests earlier in their learning experience. And the goal is to start even younger than high in 9th grade. We're talking about middle school and in elementary school. And so, as we went through multiple refinements of the academies and pathways, this is what our students will be experiencing in the 2025-26 school year. We have 5 academies, and specifically, our general studies academy is our on ramp. So we don't necessarily consider that as a career academy. However, it is an opportunity for students to explore pathways that would lead to them choosing their preferred academy and pathway. And so within each of these academies and pathways, we have smaller learning communities that help students to feel a sense of belonging and connectedness as it relates to their passions and interest. And so, with the Academies of Alexandria, we are absolutely growing and evolving in implementation and ideas. And so, with year one, what we explored was identifying and collaborating with community partners to raise awareness of the available opportunities within the academies and pathways. As we thought about the instructional experience, we wanted to identify and evaluate existing course pathways and certifications to enhance the academic offerings. And so, as we coined it as teaching through the lens. So, if I am a student in the STEM Academy, what experiences as a professional could I allow my students to engage, or offer my students the opportunity to engage with, as well as we talked about exploring allocation of resources to ensure the continued implementation of the instructional experience. As it related to our student experience, we talked about building the academy model to cultivate strong identity and overall student experience. So there was significant pushes in social media and academy selections through the academic advisement process. And then as we thought about just the general outcomes, just really setting some clear procedures and protocols, action steps to build a sustainable academy model, continuing to engage all of our stakeholders and gather their feedback. And then, of course, we premiered our first ACHS quarterly newsletter. For this upcoming year, we are talking about the progress implementation. So, working with small businesses and partners and establishing a dedicated council to assess academy needs and goals. And so that's very important for us as we continue to engage the community. As it relates to instructional experiences, we are refining course pathways and enhancing experiential learning opportunities. So we are focusing in on the outcomes. And so you'll hear teachers and students talk about project-based learning experiences and things of that nature. But the big goal there is to ensure that there are some interdisciplinary teams that are planning together and offering students very quality learning experiences. And then as it relates to the student experience, ensuring that we are interweaving the learning in the classroom with the academy's identities. And each academy came up with their own identity that is where the North Star is the profile of the learner, and then each academy, based on the pathways that are outlined, have asked students questions around how this academy connects to them directly. And so that is how we have tried to bring such a large school community into what feels more manageable and engaging for our student population. And it has not come without its challenges and different operational and logistics that take a number of different departments to engage in the conversation. But we are deeply committed to ensuring that our students have high quality learning experiences and high quality instruction through the Academy's model. And so here are just some pictures of the learning spaces at the new Mini Howard campus. We have our learning stairs, which you see on the bottom right, which is right outside of our learning forum and our cafeteria that's there. It just, all of these open spaces is what we want our students to learn in and to grow in and to have these really strong collaborative opportunities in this building. And so as you see with the design, you'll see a ton of collaborative spaces within the hallways, as well as very transparent and open classrooms. Here we have our students who are talking about their driving question as it relates to a PBL project, a project-based learning experience that they had to engage in. And we have worked specifically with Learner Center Collaborative and Blue, as well as PBL Works, to really train our teachers around project-based learning and not just thinking about the long-term projects all the time, but specifically the design elements that are a part of what PBL Works calls a gold standard project. And so thinking about inquiry and reflection and student voice and choice and authentic task and projects. So even if it is not a full unit project or a quarter project, we think specifically about how can we implement those design elements in our instruction every single day. We have a pool at our school. I'm not sure how many high schools have pools, but it has been a wonderful experience for us because through the collaboration and partnership with our city, our students could actually gain their lifeguard certification. using this very pool that is at our mini Howard campus. We have also expanded the pool instruction to not just our high school, but also to our elementary schools. So we have a splash program that's offered to our fourth grade students, and then for our students with disabilities in our citywide programs, as well as our early childhood programs, they come for swim lessons. And so this pool has opened up a number of opportunities for us to engage with our youngest learners and our older learners, our high school students, be able to connect with them as well. And I am going to end, but thank you all so much. And I know that we will be engaging in discussion and questions. Thank you, Brittany.
Oh, thank you, Carmen. That was incredible. And I'll just do a quick plug before we turn it over to Wendy. If you have questions about the Alexandria City High School project, any of the images or the big picture ideas that Carmen just walked us through, please feel free to use the Q&A feature or the chat in the webinar. Or after our breakout rooms, as a reminder, we always will have a Q&A where you can come off mute and speak with the panelists. But with that, I'm going to turn it over and hear about a very different context. Instead of a really big urban giant high school, let's kind of go to the other end of the spectrum. And with that, Wendy, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. Carmen, my wheels are turning. You've done so many incredible things at your school. It's really exciting. Thank you so much for sharing. Like Brittany mentioned, my name's Wendy Farrow, and I'm the executive director at Chico Country Day School. We are a public charter school north of Sacramento, kind of in a rural area, but also a college town. We have about 580 students. We're a TK through 8. And I think we sometimes have limited design constraints. We do have charter politics. We have to be aware of that. Our local school district is our authorizer. We have very skilled teachers. We have been in existence 30 years, and our teachers are incredible. And also we had become quite a bit siloed. And so the work that we've done over the last few years, including the work with LCC, has really been to like align and begin rowing in the same direction, which has been incredible. We shifted toward project-based learning about 12 years ago. And I've been a part of that shift the whole time. I've been at the school for 15 years. And so, this webinar kind of gave me a chance to think of like, what were those moves at the beginning too that helped us kind of get to where we are now, where we can make a little bit bigger shifts. Additionally, I think our identity has changed in our local area. Our name itself kind of is reminiscent of maybe a private school. And I think perhaps that was the original intention, to be kind of the free alternative to a private school. We started when charters kind of first began in California, but we've really tried to shift that to be a very inclusive and thoughtful school to include all learners in our area. So some big shifts that we've made over the last few years, but it's been really great. We've worked with LCC to work on our framework for the future, and also Devin has supported our governance and board support, which has been really instrumental. And we've also kind of defined our learner profile, so that's been great. A couple of things that I wanted to share today. I really believe, and I'm really excited about the adult learning that happens in schools, because I think what we can create and the learning experiences that adults have, then they can also provide those for our students. So I've been really thoughtful over the years to try to think through what learning can look like for our teachers. And I have some pictures here of our back to school launch 2 years ago. We did a kind of mini project slice. We have several local farmers markets, almost one every single day within, 10, 20 minute drive. And so we went to the small local like Wednesday farmers market, and we did something. Our driving question was, who feeds our community? And every staff member got $5, and they were in teams, and they needed to go to the different vendors and purchase some things, but then also find out a little bit more about the market, who is working at the market, what this looks like for them. And then they created some sort of artifact when we got back to school. And there was a little bit more to it. I'm happy to share the slides from kind of how I framed all of that as well. We looked at Goldie Mohammed's book, Cultivating Genius, and kind of framed a lot of what we did as adult learners, like with her framework that she uses. It was wonderful, and the greatest part about it was when we were exhibiting and the pressure that the teachers felt to, like, get their product done and share their work, and it was very low stakes. It was just us sharing with one another, but this opportunity to be like, "Hey, 2:30, we're gonna be sharing our work," and, I think they really got to feel, what their students feel like at times. And it was pretty open-ended. It was really a beautiful experience. And then as I was thinking about sharing this with you all, I thought back to kind of how did we get there? Because it takes a lot of trust to just show up on a Wednesday morning and like follow your school leader, through the market and do a project. But we started a long time ago with project tunings. And so as we worked on project-based learning, we got together in tunings. It's really a great opportunity for shared leadership. Everybody takes their turn to be a facilitator and, participates and kind of it evens out the playing field. Everybody's a contributor in those protocols. So we use a lot of protocols on campus. And I think that helped kind of buoy us toward what we're able to do now. All right. Like I mentioned too, our students also do exhibitions of learning. So these are just a couple of pictures of our kids sharing their work. Something that happened a couple years ago, we use the EL, used to be expeditionary learning, but they just go by EL education now. We use their curriculum in kindergarten through sixth grade. And so in fifth grade, there is a module where they read Esperanza Rising, and then they talk about the Declaration of Human Rights. And so the gentleman in the picture up in the corner, he is a local radio host, and he heard about the project that the kids were working on, and so he invited them to come talk about their project on the radio. So their exhibition kind of shifted from kind of our more traditional, like at school where people come in, and they actually were on the radio. So this is our second year of doing the radio performance, which was really cool. It's really neat to see those like community partnerships kind of flourish. Like as people are hearing more about what we do, they're like, oh, how can I get involved? Like, you know, how can we support your kids in doing this more meaningful work? So that's been really neat. All right. Another cornerstone of our school is we take a lot of field trips. And so there's a picture of seventh graders camping at the Presidio in San Francisco. Fifth graders did a living history experience on Angel Island, which is in the middle of San Francisco Bay. There's an old Civil War fort there, and so they do this whole living history experience there. It's really interesting. And then at the bottom, that's a picture of kids at advisory. So we have an advisory program in sixth grade through eighth grade. And at the end of the year, they do an advisory Olympics. There are about 15 kids in each advisory, and they stay with the same adult all 3 years. So they get to know kids across the grade levels, but also it ensures that all of our middle schoolers are well known by an adult on campus. And that advisory Olympics is a really fun way to end the school year together. All right, and then one other thing I wanted to share. So this is a work in progress. It's not perfect, but that's the way things go. It's a step in the right direction. We started working a little bit more diligently on competency-based assessment, and we really wanted to share more about how students are doing on their progress toward our learner profile competencies. And so we needed a mechanism to do that. So we've been working with Building 21. This is a screenshot of one page of a progress report that parents receive. So this is a fifth grade one, and you can see our five competencies that the kids are working toward are curiosity, community, creativity, responsibility, and advocacy. And then those are all broken down into what that looks like and how the teachers are assessing it. But then, parents also get a report on how their kids are doing. This is a little bit of a shift as far as ratings go for parents. And so that's a learning piece for us is how do we better communicate this? Because I think parents oftentimes want to see their students at the very highest end. And what we're doing here is trying to show a progression of like, hey, by the end of eighth grade, somewhere in that sixth through eighth grade range, we're really aiming for a 3. And so it's very natural for your kids to be at a 1.5 or a 2 as a fifth grader. So it's a little bit of a learning piece, but we're hopeful that by sharing, more of what students are doing at school and what their learning looks like and really valuing these components of the learner profile, that it helps us build a fuller picture of like this whole child, whole learner outcomes. So that's been a lot of fun. Version 2 coming out this year. Yeah. So those are just a few high points that I wanted to share, and I appreciate you all being here, and I'm looking forward to talking a bit more.
Wendy, that was incredible. Man, I thought my head was spinning after Carmen. Now it's double spinning. There's two totally different approaches, but incredible impact. It makes me want to talk back through this ecosystem before we jump into some questions. And specifically because you ended with talking about advisory and the way you're reporting learning, it just reminds me that school design decisions sit within this bigger ecosystem, right? That things like our report cards and our progress reports and our daily schedules, those are all enabling conditions that can be impacted and should be impacted, right? In service of learner-centered work. So kudos to you both for thinking about the interdependency of these different layers. I think it's easy for the focus of a webinar, right, to hone in on one, but I think your story just beautifully illustrated how interdependent it all is. So bravo, well done. Well, with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just pepper you all with some questions. Um, I'm going to start actually, Wendy, I'll start with you because I think your story starts further in the past, but I could be wrong. Carmen, correct me if I'm wrong. But as I think about the evolution and your school design to reimagine your school identity, to implement project-based learning, what was the impact that you were looking for, and how have you measured that along the way?
Oh, that's great. When our school started, it was based on the idea of integrated thematic instruction. And so like things being woven together, which I think was a really smart way to design a school to begin with. I came here about 15 years ago and we were starting to just move away from that and starting to look for like what's next. And project-based learning was I really see the difference as like ITI was very very like teacher driven. Like the teacher found the connections, the teacher created all these different bulletin boards, like they presented all these different ways that everything integrated. And then project-based learning just really honored student voice and access and opportunity quite a bit more. And even put the teacher in a little bit of like, I don't know what all of the outcomes might be. I'm not entirely certain. Like the radio example, the teacher didn't even know that that opportunity was going to come up, but she was very willing to say like, oh, that this came up. It's going to require this. We're going to make a little shift, and we're going to make sure that this happens for our students. And so I really think, as much as we can make our community our text and get our kids out and doing things, that's what I want to see. For myself too, I started as an elementary school teacher and then became a middle school teacher. And I saw a few kids in my class who were a little bit more disenfranchised from school. They were like, yeah, this isn't so much for me. And so, how do we make sure that our schools continue to be for everyone and people see themselves there? They see themselves thriving. They see, you don't have to be the very best reader. There are lots of ways that you can be successful at our school. And so that's really what we've been working toward and what we hope for our kids.
Incredible. Oh, it's so apparent in the images and in the story that you are indeed having that impact. That's awesome. Carmen, I'm actually going to pose the same question to you. Thinking about the high school, you talked a little bit about the challenge, right? 4,500 students in one high school. How do you keep a single high school experience across four campuses? How are you measuring your impact, and what is some of the impact you were hoping to have?
Sure. And when Wendy was speaking about her design, it just really brought to mind all of the newer and innovative things that we are implementing as it relates to the pre-K through 12 experience in Alexandria City Public Schools. And we know that in high school, we're talking, it becomes more real for our students as it relates to post-secondary planning and ensuring that they do have a roadmap to what they want to do after they leave high school. But I think it's important as we explore for all of our grade levels. And so, as Wendy mentioned, some of the measurements that the metrics that we're using specifically is it relates to the profile of a learner. We are actually in development of our profile of a learner rubric, and we are doing it grade level by grade level because we know that developmentally students will be in different places and spaces from pre-K to grades 12. We are also implementing very intentionally project-based learning experiences within our written curriculum. So this year, in alignment with our strategic plan and ensuring that students are engaged and challenged every day, we are implementing math project-based learning experiences at the middle school level, social studies across multiple levels, and then with world languages. And so we are looking forward to the feedback and from both students and staff around those implemented units within those content areas. And then the other pieces of that as it relates to the high school, we are really being intentional around industry credentials as we think about the academies and pathways and the students earning industry credentials and or certifications within their specific learning pathway. And the amount of staff and student surveys that the high school team will be rolling out to really determine what their next steps are going to be is going to be incredibly important. So much more of that like qualitative data as it relates to surveys and helping staff members and students and the community better understand the purpose behind the academies and the pathways. And so those are just some different um, uh, measures that we are going to implement as we move forward in the work.
Carmen, I love how at the beginning and now as you are in implementation, you are so intentionally including the voices of students and teachers and the community. So they are part of this redesign. And hopefully no one feels as though they didn't have a seat at the table. I really applaud that intentionality in your approach. Well done. Very well done. Well, I'll throw one more question your way, and then we can let folks debrief and hop in breakout rooms. But both of you are seasoned. Well, I hesitate to call anyone an expert because that makes people uncomfortable, but you're now very experienced beginners in the world of school design. But thinking back to your early days, if you could give yourself or another new leader in the space advice for getting started with school design, what wise words of wisdom might you want to pass along? And Carmen, I'll start with you since I started with Wendy last time.
That is an excellent question, Brittany. I would say in my specific experience, I would say building context is so incredibly important. Um, and I say that because oftentimes I likened this experience to like getting in a car and you have people in the car with you and you're driving and you're going somewhere, but they're asking you like, where are we going? Like, where are we going? Why are we going? And I think that for school redesign, providing that context before you get into the car is really important. And I know that I didn't share this before, but with the high school project, it predated me being in this particular role. And so I was taking all of the information that I had from previous years and trying to create meaning and trying to create context. But going into any redesign, I think it's really important to create that context before we get in the car and start driving. I think that it would have, for us, helped com- the community understand why we were doing what we were doing and going into this academies model. And it would help alignment, right, of all of the different action steps that we were taking in order to begin to implement what we were identifying as our change levers for the secondary experience. And so, and we're talking about people who are in the organization who are both um, instructional as well as operational. And I think that that would really would have helped. And it continues to help us as we continue to refine in this process.
All right, Wendy, over to you.
All right, Carmen, I totally agree with you. The thing that came to mind first, a couple of things came to mind for me right away. First is that some of this has to go just a little bit slower than maybe perhaps I would have desired when I first started working as a school leader. Like, you will get there. Those big visions that you have, like, take some time now building those foundations, and you will get there. Would have been helpful advice for me to listen to many years ago. And, I think just building trust with the folks around you. I think about the teachers and the amazing work that they're able to do with kids, and we need to trust that it will happen. And then I think kind of just building on what you said, Carmen, I totally agree with the context and what I've learned, because our school's been here and doing these things for quite some time. I took for granted that people knew our story and knew the shifts that we made and why we made them. And I've learned in the last couple of years, I need to keep sharing that. And I need to keep talking about, why 15 years ago we started making these changes. And sometimes it's hard for me to remember, like, people need to keep rehearing this and like understanding where we are and why we're going where we're headed. And that's a big part of what I get to do in this role. So that's really fun. Yeah, and then
Well,
inviting them in. My next big vision is a project slice like what we did for the teachers, but with parents. I really want the parents to experience project-based learning, because then I think a light bulb will go out off for them, like, oh, I see, like this makes a lot of sense to me.
and
So,
Brittany, if it's okay, I want to co-sign everything that Wendy just stated. That is the entire statement, Wendy, is so important. And you stated trusting the people. I will also add trusting the process too,
mhm.
because it is not going to be perfect in year one, in year two, probably not in year three, right? But it's implementing those small change ideas that are going to have the largest impact to staff, student, and community experience with whatever you're implementing. And so, um, amen.
Well said and wise sage advice. Definitely some golden nuggets. I appreciate you all sharing. With that, I know everyone must be feeling as saturated as I am. That was a lot of great info. So now is the perfect time to jump into some breakout rooms and make some meaning. So before we do that, I'm going to share my screen one more time and walk you through what you'll be doing in said breakout rooms. So you'll have like 15 to 20 minutes, nice long stretch of time. It'll be the same breakout room that you were in at the beginning of the day. So hopefully you don't have to do any reintroductions, but feel free if needed. And what I'd like to give you the opportunity now is just to draft your plan. So when you get into the room, feel free to say hello, but you might want to take a couple of quiet minutes to start to draft. And I've got a template for you. And then once you've taken a minute or two to jot down some notes, maybe 5 minutes, as much time as your room needs, then start to chat and just share your slides with each other. What are you thinking? What ideas do you have? What questions are on your mind? And leverage the power of the room. You might get some really great ideas. Someone may have already tried one of the ideas that you're noodling on. And so we just encourage you all to leverage the resources in your webinar workbook. So the links to the big moves are right there for you. But also there is a template slide, and I believe this starts on slide 4, but you're just going to go find an empty one. Add your name up at the top if you'd like, and then fill out like what is the school design structure that you might want to tinker with in your school. And remember, if you can't recall those 6 structures, they're right here in this slide, right at the top of your workbook for you. What are some existing strengths and assets that you have that you can build from in your system? What are some big moves you might make? What questions, what ideas, what notes do you have? And as you're sharing, please feel free to jot down any questions you'd like to ask the panelists, because when we come back from breakout rooms, we'll have a little bit of Q&A time for you all to pose your questions to them. So let me just pause and see if any questions pop up in the chat before we jump into breakout rooms. All right, I don't see anything popping up, so I'm going to open the rooms up. Again, we'll be there for about, I would say, 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll come back and do some Q&A and close out. If you need anything at all, feel free to come back to the main room. We will be here. I'm happy to help. See you all soon. I hope that you had really robust and productive conversations as you started to lay the breadcrumbs of what might be your next steps and your plans to make some school design moves. And as you did that, hopefully you were making meaning and thinking of questions to ask our panelists. So I'm just going to give you some time to debrief, either using the Q&A functionality within Zoom, which is down at that bottom menu bar near the mute button, or through chat, or if you want to come off mute, I can make sure that you have speaking privileges in the webinar, but we just left it for you to pepper our panelists with questions, or if I interrupted a really great conversation in your breakout room and you want to finish that conversation, I think we've got a small enough group online right now that we should have time and space for that. So let me just go to the panelist list to make sure that you all have the ability to speak. All right. You all should now have the ability to unmute yourselves and pose a question. So again, using the Q&A feature, using the chat, or coming off mute, what questions and conversation might we want to spark?
Hello, Brittany.
Hello, hello.
Yeah. My name is Oyigoga Onu. I'm an educator with Wesley High School. I happen to also lead the science department, ICT. In fact, I was the brain behind our school leadership, participating in LCC's webinar session for school leaders like ourselves, uh, because we are also thinking of redesigning our school structure to accommodate distributed leadership. I think that's one of our key challenge moving forward with our identity that we want to create, because we have already established our vision, mission, and values that will guide school transformation. But we still needed some kind of capacity building to really define a pathway. And that is why we're inspired by LCC's presentation of this opportunity. And right now, I will just want to pose this question to our distinguished panelists who have really done justice to today's presentation. Carmen, and Wendy, lovely school you have out there. Comparing with our kind of school context here in West Africa, I think we could see some similarity, especially the place-based method that Wendy showed, getting the students to get in touch with the reality that goes on around their community. I think that's where real education starts, not just in the classroom, but it starts from where the students are located. So I really appreciate, I resonated with that. But my question is, if you have distributed leadership structure in your schools, what measures are really on ground for you to create a fair and balanced response from the students and the staff in order to have harmonious decision-making strategies in your school? Because most times conflicts might arise whereby you give freedom to students to share their opinions, because we really have such experiences here. But I'll just want to find out how you have handled this, if at all it happened. Maybe it arose, you saw reason to put those strategies to control for that eventuality that might happen. I'm not sure if my question is well understood, but you may ask for any clarity. Thank you very much, Brittany, for this opportunity.
Thank you for that wonderful question. Panelists, I will turn to you. What tips and advice, structures, protocols to distribute leadership and ensure that student voice is heard, but also there's consistency and harmony, as Oyegoga mentioned? Any tips or advice?
Thank you so very much for that question. I actually had my wheels spinning around some of the different leadership opportunities that the high school team has implemented in order to build that um, collective educator agency and efficacy. And so, as a part of the academy model, we had an opportunity. I was sharing with Wendy and Brittany an opportunity to go to the academies of Nashville, which is in Tennessee, and really learn from them and their implementation of the academies model there. And one of the positions that they leverage for really promoting the Academy's model is the Academy Coach. And so the Academy Coach is the person who helps with partnerships, helps students engage in learning outside of the four walls of the classroom in collaboration with the teachers. And so in year one of implementation at the high school, we had an academy coach position. There was an academy coach position. Then from there was born the academy leads. So each specific academy has a lead teacher or a lead staff member that helps to align the work of the overall academy's model to the very specific context of the learning that would take place in their specific academy. So if I'm the STEM academy lead teacher, then I am thinking about the context for our STEM students and the learning experiences that will benefit them, the partnerships that will benefit them, et cetera. So I think having those key positions helps with decision making because those academy leads are supposed to engage with the teachers. And the goal is for the teachers to then engage with the students around what support looks like to them and what they need and what they desire as it relates to their learning experiences. And so, as I shared in the presentation within year two, there is going to be a council, like an advisory council, that will continue to help with decision making. And that council will be made up of parents, guardians, students, staff, leaders that are looking to implement those refinements as we talk about the academy's implementation. I hope that helps.
Yes, yes, it does, Carmen. Yes, I resonate with the step of setting up contact points between the management team and the staff and students. It's really helpful. I think that could create a balance in our refining the demands from both staff and students. But the challenge that might come in is establishing, what I foresee is that establishing contact points may really shield certain freedom, maybe from the students, maybe the way they would want to have laid their demands might be kind of, maybe some elements of bias may come in from the contacts. There's a contact between the students and management, or the contact between the staff and management. So how will that area be handled in such a way that there will be transparency from the ends of the students so that they feel they've given much room to air their vision for the school that serves them. So I think this where I think there might be a challenge. But what do you think? Do you foresee that too? And let me hear your take, please. Thank you. But I appreciate that fact that it's important to establish coordination, yes, so that quick responses can be achieved by the school team, the school leadership. So yes, it's good, but this is my concern. How do you address this concern, Carmen?
I'm going to make a very quick statement and then I'm going to pass it off to Wendy. I think the biggest thing is to make sure you're always lifting student voice and choice. And we are, they're our clients, there are the people that we are there to serve. And so while I think it's important that the adults um, give them the necessary information that they need in order to be aware and to have the context that they need in order to understand the different levels and reasons behind some decision making. But it is so incredibly important to have students at those tables when the conversations are happening. So oftentimes, we think we know what the support should be and we know what people need and instead of just asking. And so I think it's really engaging the students in the conversation and making them the center of any type of decision making. Wendy?
Yeah, I agree with you, Carmen. I was thinking a little bit about like what structures do we have in place so that we're not forgetting students. And so our students participate on our interview panels. We're really intentional about that. They also participate in our project tunings. We have kind of started to work out a plan where we have a student who's a participant on our school board, and I would like to map out and plan more focus groups with kids. And really what I would love is, um, we've talked a lot about belonging at our school and designing for belonging. I really want the kids to define belonging and then holding the adults accountable for it. And so, building in structures and times where kids are elevated and they are placed in the center. We do a Monday morning gathering of the whole school on our field, and there are students who are in charge of that. Like anywhere that the students, we have student ambassadors, they lead tours of our campus. Anywhere we can plug them in and they're speaking instead of the adults, that's a win to me. And then introducing them to things like dilemma protocols and project tuning protocols, then we can engage in those conversations and kind of even the playing field of, everybody's voice coming to the table and kind of digging into some of those challenges together and then coming up with solutions.
What an awesome question. Thank you so, so much for taking us deeper into distributed leadership and to beliefs about learner agency. I think we unearthed some really great themes. So, excellent question. As we wind down our time together today, I am going to launch, as always, our feedback poll. This is 3 very quick questions. My goal is for 100% participation today, but I'd love to get your feedback as your input has actually shaped the way we've designed these webinars. So based on your feedback from the early sessions, I now know which folks like to be in a breakout room by themselves or which like to be in a bigger breakout room. So I really appreciate the feedback. And with that, I'm going to wind us down while you are filling out the Zoom poll. I will just give a plug, as always, to check out all of the resources that are available at learnercentered.org. Tons of blog posts, tools, playbooks on learner agency, distributed leadership, school design, all the topics that we explored today. And also, please, I want to give you a little bit of homework. Please take the ideas that you jotted down as your potential plan, your next steps, take those and socialize them with someone, maybe even some students, before next week's call. Next week is session 4, our final webinar in this series. We will be planning for impact, and it would be wonderful if you've got some input from your community. It doesn't have to be big. It could just be in the line at the grocery store, ask someone for their input, and we will use that to refine your plan. And then also just to plug that this fall, there's a lot going on with the Learner Centered Collaborative. We've got some school visits that we're trying to plan in September. If you'd like to join us for those, please reach out. And in October, we will be in New Orleans at the Full Scale Institute, which used to be the Aurora Symposium. And with that, I am going to close us out by just inviting you all to reach out at collaborate@learnercentered.org if you need anything. And if not, we will see you next week. Thank you everyone for coming. Have a wonderful day.